Hey everyone, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, investment property, a business, or any other sort of real estate, and you want to know what the biggest issue is facing real estate in 2023, stick around and we're going to discuss. If you're new to my videos, welcome. My name is John Cummings, and I'm with Better Homes and Gardens, Cassadon Realty. And my hope for this channel is to just provide you with some information to help you with any real estate questions you may have, whether it's market specific information or anything else you want to discuss. Feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to do a video on it or discuss in person. If you like the content, feel free to subscribe and you'll see anything else that I put out. So today's topic, I wanted to go over what the biggest issue is, in my opinion, in 2023 for real estate, and that it would be affordability. So we're all facing affordability issues all throughout the United States. And it's no secret in the past 2 years that we've seen home values, skyrocket as sales went up significantly due to low interest rates and an already low supply of housing. And in response to this, as we discussed in a previous video, which I will put in the description below about the Fed went and increased the rates. And this is the fastest rate hike that we've seen in the Fed's history, actually. So these two events happening one after the other have basically compounded an issue that we already had of a low supply of housing, and have also created a bigger issue of unaffordability within the market, which is at an all-time high. So, why is this important? Obviously, if you're looking to buy a house right now, you're pretty pissed because you can't afford to buy a house in likely an area that you want or the size of the house that you need. Um, if you're a seller, you're probably also pissed because the buyer pool that you just had recently is now diminished significantly. Um, Now, I will say if you're in an area, good area, and you price your home accordingly, you're not just price gouging anyone, and you get a good realtor that's helping you to make the right best decisions. You're probably not going to have any sort of issue, especially in the Lehigh Valley area. You really shouldn't have any issue selling your home, but it's just a little different than it was the past 2 years. Um, but let's talk about how this affordability issue affects everyone and ultimately makes our situation even worse. So I'm going to start off by talking about tenants. So why are tenants a part of this equation? Well, if you're a tenant, you're worried about rent, which has also increased. And why have rents increased? And why are they likely to continue to increase? Well, as unaffordability goes up in housing, it pushes more people into the renter pool because they can't purchase a home. So the more renters there are, um, the more pressure there is on units. And if there's a low supply of units and a high amount of renters, what's that going to do to the price? It's going to increase it. As much as we've already seen it increase, it's likely to continue to increase. And if a tenant can't pay rent because the prices have just gone so high, and likely we're going to run into this issue where tenants just can't pay the rents. The landlord is ultimately going to take the hit. Obviously, it's not good for the renter, but it's also not good for the landlord because they are the ones that are ultimately responsible for the property. So in this type of situation, landlords will try to keep their vacancies low by holding the rents instead of raising them. But this also creates an issue for landlords, which we're going to discuss in a little bit, and that will also affect the overall industry and the unaffordability as well. So, and moving on to employees, how does unaffordability affect employees? Well, employees could be either home owners or renters, but wage growth has obviously not kept up with the rate of inflation or the rising costs of anything else. And this again, goes back to homeowners and renters. And if you can't pay your rent, and if you can't make your mortgage payments, eventually someone's going to take the hit. Obviously, if you own a home and you lose the home, the bank is still going to lose out on all of that money that they had loaned out. So they're also going to have incentives to work with homeowners, um, along with landlords working with renters. But eventually, someone does take this hit if affordability can't get under control. And this also affects builders. So builders really are the solution to this entire problem, because they're the ones that are going to increase the supply of housing in the market. But looking at affordability as a major issue for them, how much does it cost to build a home in 2023? According to the National Home Builders Association, the median cost to build a home from scratch in 2023 is $446,000, and this does not include land. So this is just the median price. This isn't the high end. Obviously there's low end, but this is just the median price. So it's largely going to be different depending on the area you're in as well. Take, for instance, I live in the Saucon Valley area in the Lehigh Valley. And I just looked at some recent comps for land that had sold in the past 6 months. And you could, for a 1 acre plot of land, you could be anywhere between $100,000 and $400,000 just for the land. So you add that 100 to 400,000 on top of 446,000. Plus, you're going to need to pay the overhead for the builder, and plus, they're going to want to make some sort of profit in this entire endeavor. So now, it doesn't seem very affordable anymore. So what does that mean for the builder? Well, a builder is just not going to build a home that no one can buy due to affordability. So what are they going to do? Well, they're not going to build. And this is similar to the problem we saw back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, where home builders were not building homes because it just didn't make sense financially to them. Obviously, you'll see some builders building homes, but you're going to see a large reduction because they eventually aren't going to have anyone that's going to be able to afford the homes they're building. So this doesn't help our situation at all. It's actually going to make it worse in the years to come if they don't start getting incentivized to put more supply on. Now, moving on to landlords, I mentioned them earlier with the tenants, and you may not have much sympathy for the landlords, but the rising costs and the affordability also does affect them, and it does impact the overall market. And the way that this really affects them is, as I mentioned, landlords in uncertain times are going to try to hold on to all their tenants. They're not going to want to have a lot of vacancy. Normally, they don't want a lot of vacancy anyway, but in uncertain times, they want to hold everything steady. So they may be incentivized to not raise rents during a time of high inflation and high costs. However, as their costs increase, they are the ones that are responsible for the property. They're responsible for repairs and anything else that needs to happen with the property. So if you get a landlord that's getting squeezed on the cost side, and they're not increasing the rent either to keep the vacancies low, or they just don't think anyone's going to be able to afford it, you're likely going to be faced with a lot of units that are in poor shape. They're not managed properly, and the maintenance isn't done. So it just creates a bad situation overall. So, moving on to investors, many investors are holding back in these times. They are typically going to work with landlords and builders, and investors are important for this situation, because if they're holding back and they're not working with landlords or home builders, this again is going to reduce the supply that comes online, which is just going to make our problem even worse. So if you have no investors investing in real estate, you're really not going to fix the issue, or at least maybe fixing up homes that are out of commission right now and putting new supply back on at a cheaper cost than building a home. But again, with high costs and affordability at an all-time low, it makes the investment difficult to do. Now I want to move on to a group that's probably quite controversial, but politicians. So why do we want to talk about politicians in this whole equation? Well, it may not seem like it, but politicians do care about affordability and homelessness. And why do they care about affordability and homelessness? It doesn't seem like they do a whole lot, but they do. And this is because when there's homelessness and there's unrest, and people don't like to be homeless, so they vote accordingly. So any any policymaker that wants to stay in office is going to make policies and fight for things to uh, to push through to help these issues of homelessness and affordability. So these policymakers are going to put out these policies and try to combat these issues. And this could be in the form of rent control. It could be in the form of subsidies. It could be in the form of stimulus. Um, there's a bunch of different things they can do, but they are going to put these forth to try and combat these issues. Now, we mentioned a lot of problems and how they affect everybody. And really, what is the solution to all this? And it's more supply. So how do we get more supply on in situations like this? And we touched on it with the politicians. Um, it, to be able to build more homes and put more supply on, investors, landlords, and home builders need to work together, and they need to be incentivized to do so. So if affordability is an all-time low, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to do that. But if there are offsetting incentives to do so through policies made, then it would entice more investors, home builders, to come back online and increase the supply. So, what kind of policies would be needed to put in place? Now, I'm not a fan of rent control. I don't believe that it actually works. I think it makes it worse because if you think about it, if you have rent control, what home builder or what landlord is going to work in an area where there's rent control and they can't control their property? Doesn't make sense. But there are impact fees that could be reduced, and this is basically the cost for developers to build on a lot. An example with this would be to tie into the electric or the sewer, those types of things. Um, density and zoning restrictions can be eased upon, and this has been done already. But I think as our population continues to grow, we're going to see that density and zoning restrictions will get eased up a bit. And subsidies to build, like I mentioned earlier, if there's an offsetting subsidy to combat the unaffordability at the end of the project, it would entice more builders and investors to do so. Um, so this is the major solution to the problem that we have. But why should we all pay attention to this? Well, if you're a homeowner and you've listened to everything I just said, it's easy to see that we're likely not going to see a huge correction in home values, especially in the immediate future. Um, with the lack of supply and the inability for politicians to make changes quickly in policies, um, it's almost certain that we're going to continue to see uh, housing prices propped up, even if the economy has it tanks out, and that's mainly due to the supply. Um, but again, it depends on the area you're living in. If you're living in an area where there's a huge amount of migration, such as California, New York, Texas, even parts of the Lehigh Valley have seen movement. But again, our population is still increasing in the Lehigh Valley, so we're likely not going to get affected, greatly by any sort of recession or any sort of a major event that's going to crash home prices. If you're a home buyer or renter, you may want to look into buying a home in one of these areas where there are a lot of migration out of, such as New York, California, or like I mentioned, even certain parts of the Lehigh Valley have seen movement. So it just kind of depends. And if that's not really in your cards and you're living in an area that's still growing, such as the Lehigh Valley, you just need to be aware that our situation is likely not going to change. It just report that it looks like we're going to see in the next 5 years another 100,000 people moving into the area, and that's just an estimate. So if you're in the area, we're already short supplied, and you think you should wait, it may not be the best time to wait, because if 100,000 more people move into the area, the situation isn't going to be much better. But it's just important for you to have the information. As an investor, you're going to want to keep an eye on all the policies that are coming through. I know that Pennsylvania is considering rent caps. So that's something you're going to want to look into. California has already done it. I believe New York already has as well. So, as zoning restrictions, HOA restrictions, rent cap policies all come into play, this is going to be, a major impact on your investment. So, unfortunately, affordability is an issue that we are all facing, and it does impact everyone. But if we can at least look ahead and try to gauge where things are going, we could make better decisions about what we do with our investments and our real estate purchases and sales. Thank you all for watching. I hope you like the content. Feel free to subscribe, comment, reach out, and I'll see you on the next video.